Hello, everyone. Hello. Great to see you all here, and I think I see lots of new faces. Would you raise your hand if this is the first time that you've been to one of these Sunday with Friends programs? Yay! Wonderful. We are so glad that you're here. We're so glad that we have a Friends of the Library organization that is so gracious as to organize these programs for us. We have 2 or 3 more programs coming up. There's a brochure in the back that will give you all the details about the future programs. And we are fortunate today to have the organizer of all of these programs, Ben Jennings, back there in the back. So let's give Ben It's just wonderful when things just kind of happen, and Ben just kind of puts these authors together, and we're just good to go. My job as the director of these events is to make announcements. Think of them as commercials or public service announcements. If you're not a member of the Friends, join. You don't have to live in Washington County. Membership's not a lot of money, and it will keep you informed about all the wonderful things the Friends are doing. One of the things that the Friends started this year, they've always been good to give us money. They have also helped us with budget process in regard to making appeals to supervisors on occasion. But like it's getting to be harder to get money from local government. And so the Friends of the Library has organized an advocacy committee. It's in its initial stages, and they will be doing things like putting information together about what our budget requests are to the county and to the town of Abington. They will be able to share information about how that money would be used and why it's needed, and they will give you information to contact about how you can contact your elected officials, county officials, or town officials, and there'll be opportunities that people can go to budget hearings and speak. So it's just a whole range of activities that people could get involved in to support the public library. We are a county agency. We receive a little bit of money from the state, 42% less than we did 10 years ago. And we receive just a smidgen of money from the town. So any effort that we can do to increase that just a little bit really gives us more to work with. I've got this brightly colored sign-up sheet back here. If you'd like to be involved in this effort, just give us some contact information and we'll be in touch with you. Now, about the program. We have surveys on all the chairs. If you would complete those surveys, that helps us with our planning. There's pencils on the back table, and there's also a place that you can drop that survey. Now, we usually have books that are available for purchase, and our author usually signs the books, always is willing to sign the books, and our author would have been willing to do that today. But there was a little mix-up between the publisher and us some way, and we do not have books available for sale. But what we do have is a list of Janisse's books, and you can order them and get signed copies. We provided all of that information so you can pick that up, go back home, order your book, and she will graciously send that book on to you. We do have refreshments. We have got an awesome refreshment committee. So stay tuned after the event, and you can visit with the author and all of your other friends here and enjoy the food. And then we have another treat for you before our author. We've been asking friends of the library and then friends of the author to make the introductions. And this time we have asked Steve Lindeman to provide the introductions. Steve and his wife live up in Hyder's Gap. They have been some of our strongest advocates for that little branch library, and we're just so glad to have one of our friends introducing the speaker.
Thank you. Welcome everybody, and we're in for a special treat today. We don't just have one author today. Ben wrangled a twofer today. So we've got two authors speaking today, which is wonderful. And I gave Ben a little bit of a hard time about this. I've noticed that he's sort of been trying to stand in the background more. So he's trying to pass off this introduction thing to other people, which I guess is a good idea. So I'm here mainly because I've known Janisse for quite a while, and I'll get to that in just a second. And I am old enough now that I have to put these on and look quickly at my notes. So Janisse, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Janisse's work. She's a writer, naturalist, activist. She's the author of 6 books. Probably one of the most memorable, in my eyes, is The Ecology of a Cracker Childhood. And I worked some in that landscape years ago, so I'm quite familiar. And several volumes of nonfiction, including her latest, The Seed Underground. She lives in southeastern Georgia, Reidsville, Georgia, on an organic farm with her husband Raven and daughter Sky. And she's currently the Lewis Rubin Visiting Writer at Hollins University in Roanoke. She has an MFA from the University of Montana and has won many awards for her writing. In 2015, she was inducted into the Georgia Writers Hall of Fame. She writes about longleaf pines, rural community, river seeds, climate, habit fragmentation, meadow bogs, and healing. So I first met Janisse several years ago, running around the hills, the red hills of southern Georgia. This was in the 1990s. At the time, she was running with kind of a rough crowd. She was running around with botanists, ornithologists, foresters, and herpetologists. And as they say here, we've been knowing each other ever since, and we're delighted that she continues to come visit our small town. Holly Haworth is a Tennessee native, now living in Floyd County, Virginia, and she's brought some of her posse here with her today. Met some of them earlier from Floyd. A wonderful place. Her work has appeared in the Oxford American, Orion, Virginia Quarterly Review, Earth Island Institute, and many others. She's reported on the harvest of mezcal, agave, mushroom foraging, medicinal plants, timber, gas, and coal mining industries, coal ash spills, coal ash dumps, ancient fossils, freshwater mussels, cricket song, and long train rides. She's the recipient of the Middlebury Fellowship in Environmental Journalism and many other awards of note, and she was an artist in residence at Guadalupe Mountains National Park, an honor which she is quite proud. She's graduated of the University of Tennessee, obtained her MFA from Hollins, and perhaps one day she'll get to go to Virginia Tech. I give you Janisse and Holly.
Listen, who you are cannot be discovered in books. You are the ground. Trees rise ecstatically, hungrily into their own being. In time, they become mineral, bones, and skin. In time, they become the clean blue air.
What's this one? Sorry. Just a little higher.
Thank y'all so much for coming today, and thanks for having me back to Abingdon, one of my favorite places. I want to especially thank Ben Jennings, who contacted us initially, of the Friends of the Library, and Carolyn Teddy Bundy, who is the fearless leader. Thank you all, friends, you 300 strong, for having us here. And thanks to Charlotte and Thomas and Donna Marie and all of you at Washington County Public Library. I want to thank my friends, my good friends with whom I always stay when I'm in the area, Chris and Steve Lindeman. Thanks to the contingent from Blue Mountain School and Floyd who are here. They drove a long way today to be here. It's so nice to meet them and see them. And my old friend, the really famous artist, Suzanne Strike. I'm just terrifically honored that, Suzanne, that you're in the room. I'm also proud to be sharing the podium with Holly Hayworth, my good friend and colleague. This essay that I'm going to read is so in general, Sunday with Friends is an author reading their new book, from their newest book. But because I haven't had a book in 5 years, I thought that I would read something that I've been working on. So I've been working on a collection of essays and another book that will be kind of a companion to the longleaf pine forest, but really looking at pine bogs, at meadow bogs. Those are the places of carnivorous plants. But I also have been, piddling around with a novel and all kinds of things, and mainly raising a little girl who came into our lives 5 years ago, and she's adopted, so she's 14 now. But between her and the farm, I just haven't had much time to write. So I'm extremely grateful to Thorpe Meckel and Hollins University for having me here as their writer in residence for the semester. My little girl is going crazy without me, but I just say, well, you figure it out, because right now I'm reinventing myself as a writer. My parents are getting older, and my dad has now been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's a terrifically sad period, as most of you know, to go through this stage where you're helping your parents with aging, and while you also are aging. My dad, from Ecology of a Cracker Childhood, is a collector. That's why he had a junkyard. He's got many, many buildings full of stuff. I was talking to Teddy at lunch, and she said that her dad was also a collector. They called him an eccentric collector. And I said, what did he collect? And she said, Cadillacs. So, yeah. She told me they lived on 14 acres, and because the trees, so it was pine trees at my house, and that just kind of hid everything. But her trees were deciduous, and she said, so when fall came, you could look out and see how many new Cadillacs her dad had in the yard. I dread the job, but the room has to be emptied. Both of my father's knees are bad, and the day will come sooner than later when he can no longer climb the stairs to his and my mother's bedroom. My parents, I'm both proud and sorry to say, have made a career out of living in the moment, putting off anything that can be put off another day. Except my mother finally understands that stair climbing is about to run out. They call this room the sales room, a vision having been that customers to their junkyard might enter this room and not the living quarters. The room was never finished, however, its floor a concrete slab somewhere below the flotsam. It long ago became a pack room. The odor of mold is so intense it might actually overpower one of us. This mold is deadly, I say. We need to get the door open, Mama says, and a fan going. Never tall, she's lost some height and earned some wrinkles. Her soft hair is light gray, tucked up with pins. She stumbles a little as she turns to retrieve an electric fan. She moves back to help me with a random white door leaning against the actual brown door on hinges, but it's blocked by a whimsicality of stuff and it's too heavy for her. Anyway, I wade into a thicket of walking canes, maybe 5 of them, handing them 2 at a time to my mother, who plants them in a cane forest by the large fireplace. I move a wooden clock with a chain hanging out the bottom, careful not to hit a dusty, foot-tall glass case, its walnut frames loose, displaying a wadded piece of paper. I stand holding the flimsy case, surveying to find a horizontal place to stash it. Finally, the door is open, sunlight filtering in, the September day heating up South Georgia. The fan is humming. My parents are collectors. My sister says to get real and call it by its true name. I close my mouth tight. There's an entire banana box of chargers for cell phones, cordless phones, toys, tools. If somebody needed a charger, this would be the place to look. If somebody needed a table lamp, this would be the place too. I had no idea my mother loves lamps this outlandishly. It's almost a fetish. And they're actually taping this thing, but I hope my mother never sees it. One lamp's glass base is filled with seashells. One is large, ugly, brown ceramic. Somebody has ruined a crockery jug making another. Some have torn shades, some have intact ones, some have none. 5 or 6 shades are stacked inside each other on an antique bed. We've got to figure out what to do with these lamps, I say to my mom. She's standing just outside the door, ripping rotten cloth off a lampshade. She intends to save the metal skeleton of it. Her sensibilities would never allow her to pitch the entire ruined shade in the trash, since she knows very well from life on a junkyard that the metal can be recycled and that recycling metal is lucrative. I agree. You got any ideas? I don't, honey. We'll have to pack them up somewhere. Do you know anyone who sells lamps? We could give them all away. Somebody might be able to make money on them. Even as I say this, I know in my heart that's not going to happen. My folks don't give anything away. They are keepers. We can put them under the old car shelter out at the farm, Mama says. They'll just ruin outside. I say, but we'd have a lot more room to work with if we got them out of here. There are at least 20 table lamps. I begin to line them on a little patch of floor at one end of the sales room between 2 large rolled brown carpets, half-painted canvases, lone shoes, a wicker laundry basket filled with somebody else's clothes, all manner of etc. This clears a small patch of floor space, enough to start packing the boxes I've brought. I begin packing whatever's within reach: alarm clock, basket of silk flowers, candle holders, ceramic owl, wooden owl, brass vase, conch shell. Many of the things I find are ruined, dusty, molded, crushed by weight, decomposing, because I realize when a person is a collector, when his or her mission is collecting, maintenance is not an objective. My mother is hesitant to throw out anything, second-guessing herself, but I take a break and go roll their curbside trash receptacle to the edge of their unfinished porch. It gets rotten pantyhose, broken glass, shoes warped and split beyond use. I keep packing, stacking boxes in a space I've liberated along the wall. 2 more canes, I say to my mom. I find a handful of pens and pencils. Let's put office supplies in one box. Here's a bag of pens. She hands them to me. My mother's working hard. She knows it's time. I would bet good money that 90% of these pins don't write. We don't get far before we find termite damage. My parents knew we'd get there. They discovered termites a decade ago and treated the house foundation and the footing. So that stopped them? That stopped them, Mama says. We just never got the mess cleaned up. My younger brother stops by for a quick visit. He's tall, his still dark hair cut short in the front, growing past his shoulders in the back. He follows me outside to the trash receptacle where I'm tossing cardboard that termites have turned to powder. Do you think the termites are gone? He asks. I don't know. I wonder. If not, the whole house could fall down around them. God, let's hope not. Did you see how the termites ate part of that wooden desk? No, but I see what they've done to the books. Years ago, my father bought a couple thousand copies of my second book in hardcover, sold to him when the paperback was released, and they are stacked at the back of the sales room in boxes. Daddy can't resist a deal, and he doesn't want to see my name remaindered. But termites have been enjoying the books a lot more than readers. A few hundred of the books, maybe more. Eastern subterranean termites, the most common termite in the southern U.S., work like this. They eat dead plant material, not only the structural timbers of buildings, but also, once they break and enter a place, paper, cloth, carpets, photographs on the walls. They construct these little tunnels called shelter tubes, which keep them hydrated and out of the sun and protected from predators, including human pest control agents. These tubes are made of plant matter, saliva, and soil. The termites build tunnels up from the earth where they live, through or on soft wood or some other biodegradable substrate, and they chew on what they can digest, which is cellulose, meaning wood or paper or cardboard, skulking inside their mud tubes. They are detritivores, the scientific papers say. They live on detritus. They turn it into feces, tiny golden pellets of fertility. That means they're making dirt. My own home, Red Earth Farm, is located on a dirt road 30 miles from my childhood home where my parents live. In our garden shed is a jar full of dirt. When my husband and I give tours to people who want to see a working farm, not an industrial monoculture row crop farm, but a farm circa 1900 with its milk cows and hogs, guineas and Jersey bull, and one mean mule, I lead them to the doorway of the shed. This is why we call the place Red Earth, I say, because of the red clay at the bottom of the dried up, well, silky and moist, but tough substrate of everything we do. Because of the native people who fought for this land until the creek ran red. Because of the slaves and the blood they lost. Because of the blood that ran from the women and the men and the animals whose lives were and are given to the people. The clay looks like dirt that happens to be red, a jar of crumbly loam. Like the frass of the termites, however, it is a sacred thing, constructed of the detritus of many living things that inhabited this land. It is made of life, and it is alive. When the visitors are gone, I walk the dirt road alongside the farm, the mile to the mailbox. Along it, I find shards of flint left by the creek inhabitants. On almost every walk, I find something. The shards are easy to see since we don't have flint geologically in southern Georgia. We have ferrous oxide, little red pebbles called rain rocks because rain washes them to the surface. The flint is lighter in shade and in weight and stands out among the tiny blood-red rocks. I bring the shards home in my pockets, gathering up fragments of points and blades, because this stuff belonged to people no longer here to pack it up. I place the artifacts in a flat basket woven of longleaf pine needles. In the basket is a button that says, "Go make history." I try not to get depressed about all the stuff in my parents' home. I have a hate-hate relationship with it. My parents, both born poor, 37 and 39, coming out of the Great Depression, came from a time in which stuff was hard to come by. Now we live in a world lean on the things that really matter and that really fulfill, like civic engagement and family time and neighborliness, but fat with stuff, until all of us as consumers are morbidly obese. Stuff is constantly being thrown at us. As an author, I get more than my share, besieged with gifts everywhere I travel. Cloth bags and t-shirts and pens and books, book after book after book. We humans cannot quit making stuff, using more and more of nature to manufacture more and more material crap. Whereas the children of the Depression, like my folks, had to work hard to accumulate, we have to work hard not to accumulate. I have to send a little note ahead to say, please, no gifts, to the folks who invite me to do talks. I have to constantly walk through the rooms of my house with an eye toward purging. I do not shop. So many human interactions are based on things, swapping bounty back and forth, eBay, Craigslist, the classifieds, flea markets, consignments, and all shopping in general, of course, is simply human interaction at its most primal. But we have enough gewgaws and whatnots and doodads, no more. We have to continually seek different kinds of interactions, different foci. One Saturday during the cleaning out at my parents' house, our neighbor, who is 82 and also paring down, he actually died last week, my dear neighbor, gives us all his worms. He's lost interest in the worms that have made dirt for him for 15 years. Besides, the wooden tubs he built are rotting and he'll have to construct more. Better to give them to the younger farmers down the road, my husband and me, whose enterprise is to make dirt, to build healthy soil in which nourishing food will grow, which means soil full of microorganisms, full of minerals, full of mycorrhiza. They'll eat just about anything, Bill tells us, except citrus. They don't like citrus. You got a paper shredder? They'll eat paper. I think of the books. What about eggshells? My husband asks. Yes, eggshells, Bill nods. I gave them peanut shells once. It took a long time to get rid of those, but they did it. He tells us to bury the food to make it more available, since worms don't like sunlight and hesitate rising to the surface of their bin to bring down food. I run my hands through the amazing loam that the worms have deposited. I hit a half-rotten pear and a pod of old okra. The okra still holds its shape, but it's full of worms, not plant fiber, and they are busily turning it into something better than it was, some end game we're all heading toward, some substance that is the essence of all life. I bury the worm pod and gather up a handful of pink gummy earthworms wrapped around clumps of rich black soil, rich as my parents' pack room, rich as the bottom of a termite colony. Praise the transformers. We all become something better than what we were. I've decided 3 things. 1, I will accept anything that my mother decides to give me on the days that we clear out her sales room. I will take any gift home to the farm and do with it what needs to be done. 2, in fact, what I do with it is we made a little free room at my little tiny public library. I am the friends group there. And I just take it to the free room at the library, and the next time I go, it's all gone. Termites. That's the first thing I learned. Whatever she gives me, I take. 2, I will do this job without judgment. My brother and I have a running conversation, the basic summary of which is, oh my God, what are we going to do? That conversation begins with an observation about my parents' long-standing date with yard sales on Saturday mornings, or about a clearance of a section of their yard only to have it immediately refilled, or about their pack spaces, inefficiently filled, closest to the doors first until the doorways become blockages, as if one or the other of my dear parents goes to that doorway and sticks something new through it, hoping only to get the door closed before the object slides out. My brother and I want our parents to change their ways, magically, which we realize, of course, is not going to happen. Doing this cleanup job without judgment means just doing what needs to be done, not getting bogged down in the past or the future. The third decision is really an epiphany. On one visit, my father and I have a candid conversation about the termite-drilled books. Let me have the ruined ones, I say. I'll take them home and burn them to make ash, also used to make soil. It's almost impossible to burn a book, my father says. Not enough oxidation? You'd probably do better to bury them than burn them, he says. Okay, I'll bury them, I say. In the end, however, he won't part with the books. The undamaged ones will stay in the sales room, in boxes along the back wall. When my parents move their bedroom downstairs, they will look at the books daily. The rest, damaged, will go into an old double-wide trailer out at the farm that they also use as a pack house. My father's knees will not allow him to move the books. I will do it for him, packing up termite-tunneled, chewed, powdery, unreadable books as if they were bound for the Smithsonian, stacking boxes of them ever so carefully at the back of a room in the trailer, high as the ceiling, working my way toward the door. You know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that termites can take a book back down from words and ideas and pages to nothing. No, not nothing. Back down to dirt, where it all started. That leads me to my third decision. I am not going to worry about what will happen to all the stuff my parents have collected, or that I have collected for that matter, because it's going back to the earth, all of it. The termites, the worms, the millions of bacteria in a spoonful of soil will happily do the postmodern work of deconstructing what we have constructed, and valiantly working as emissaries of the dirt, they will reclaim most of what humans have fabricated, at least the plant-based material, hauling it earthward in the tiny wheelbarrows of their mouths, one wee load at a time. Bacteria and rust and deep time will take care of the rest. The little creatures will take care of the books. They will take down the books. They will take down the book jackets. They will take down the cardboard boxes. They will take down the shades. They will take down the canes. They will take down the walls and the roof. All the stuff goes back. Praise to the little beings who are the transformers. Praise to the transporters. And praise to the ground that accepts and banks it all, that keeps rising out of lava and bedrock into layers of humus, unsurpassed transformation, the best savings account humanity could have, the one real thing that stands between us and scarcity, poverty, hunger. Praise to the dirt, which contains all that we have and all that we are, our true home, our destiny. So I end with two tiny poems, and one is just looking at simplicity from another way. Simplify your life, the doctor said, as if roses and gardenias are complications. The pasture, the horses, the sheep. Art is complication. Science. Better I should become a simpleton. One plate instead of two. Nothing for my neighbor who may visit, although she too has simplified. It's simple, he says, but love is not simple. Desire is not. Health is not. The spider weaves complicated webs for her livelihood, or perhaps for her art. Without her web, my world is more simple, without the persimmon tree dropping its wild, messy droops. The math equation that can be simplified to 1, even to 0. By whose system should I proceed? And then the very last one, and before I sit down, I want to remember that Suzanne's, the King Museum has Suzanne Strike's exhibit up, which is called Notes on the State of Virginia. If you haven't seen it, please go see it. On April 28th, I'll be teaching a couple-hour writing workshop that afternoon, starting at 2. So you'll find information on that from the museum's website. Keep your eyes, and thank you so much to Holly. I met Holly a decade ago, and I recognized immediately that there was something profound and magical about her work. She's a dear friend of mine. I consider it a high honor that we are friends. I've been friends with many writers, many good, wonderful, beautiful writers in my life, and her writing is so just so hard-hitting and so inspiring that it's a special honor that a person who's hasn't had a book published yet but is working on one and is she'll be a person that you hear from a long time, and it is an extreme honor to read with her. Keep your eyes open. Stay quiet. Any moment now, a lovely bird will fly into the resurrection fern. You must be ready for that kind of beauty.
Thank you, Janisse. That was such a stunning reading as always. Thank you. Hi to all of you. A little change in perspective. Thank you to the Washington County Public Library, Ben Jennings, and Chris and Steve Lindeman, wherever you are. I've lost you. There's Steve, but for putting us up in a beautiful place, beautiful and restful home in Hyder's Gap. I'm gonna start by telling you a little story of one of my ancestors who I've recently learned about, who passed away in Abingdon, and one of the reasons that I'm here today, as we are all here today, because of our ancestors and what they did and where they went. I am from East Tennessee, from the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. I was raised there by a forester and a botanist. That's my mother. And she has also dug up a lot of our ancestral stories. So on her way up to Virginia to visit me for the first time last fall, she uncovered the story of an ancestor of mine, my 7th great-grandfather, Henry Cresswell. He died here in Abingdon. He founded Sinking Springs Presbyterian Church here. And he had called for a reverend to come and start the church up. And so a few years later, 1774 or 1776, the reverend called him up, not on the phone, however they called up, a yodel or something, and asked him to come help him move his library of books. Actually, they had built a fort, and this was Cherokee homeland, and it was their home, and he wanted to get his books into this fort to make sure that they wouldn't be burned or lost. So my ancestor, Henry, came with his horse and wagon and loaded up the preacher's library in his wagon, and they were moving the books, and they were in fact attacked, and he was killed by a Cherokee, my 7th great-grandfather. and he died. They're moving the library, and because of that, the Reverend survived, and the library was saved. But because of that, his wife Rebecca moved down to into Tennessee, where she had family already moved down in the southwestern migration to Tennessee, and settled there in Sevier County, where I am from. So I'm here today in a library in Abingdon because my 7th great grandfather saved a library in Abingdon in 1774. So that's a pretty interesting circle. And I want to honor him, and I want to honor the Cherokee whose home this is, and not just the written word, but oral culture today and all the oral cultures of the world. Just a little bit about me, because I know that you all don't know me or my work. I'm the extra, the extra bonus. I started as an editor at a daily newspaper for 4 years. I was the arts and entertainment editor at a daily. I was working as a music writer, and I was, a rock and roll journalist, and I, right out of college, got a job in Atlanta at a music magazine. And, but I had the sense that I wanted to do something a little different, so I up and left, and I moved to a tiny town in New Mexico in the high desert mountains, the southern tip of the Rockies, Ruidoso, New Mexico, to teach environmental education with AmeriCorps, which took me to a conference in Albuquerque where I was wandering the streets, and I saw a magazine that looked really interesting, and I picked it up, and I saw like some teasers on the front: should nature have rights, and serenading belugas in the South Sea, and I was like, that's my kind of magazine. And I saw an advertisement for a writing workshop in Vermont with Orion, with the magazine, and Janisse was leading it. Didn't know who she was, but it sounded like a cool thing to do. So the deadline was yesterday, but I applied, and I got in. I went up to Vermont near the Canada border, and I met Janisse there, which is kind of why I'm here today too. So, and I've been just really inspired by her work and her life and her passion ever since, and it's been a guiding light for me. I have been finding my way into science and nature writing and long-form environmental reporting, personal environmental reportage, a la John McPhee kind of stuff, but a little more personal. And anyway, all that is to say that I'm going to read. I'm not going to read some reporting and journalism. Today I'm going to read from a book that I wrote, that I finished last year. It's in 13 Cycles of the Moon. It's a long poem. It's an almanac in verse. It's a personal poetic almanac. I grew up reading Aldo Leopold's almanac, and that's was always a big influence to me. And being in Cherokee homeland, the heart of the Cherokee, where I grew up, was also a huge influence to how I thought about the world and my sense of place. So I'm going to read from that. It's a cycle of 13 moons. I'm going to read 2 moons for you. Ripe corn and drying up moon. Those were a translation of the Cherokee names of July and August. I'm going to hide this. Just a minute. I ripe corn, new, I saw it in the south, scything blue, a polished silver blade sharpened me. Sliced chanterelle mushrooms, pale apricots, cold flesh in my palms. Flesh, when left alone, digests debris or grows from rotting things, so we might eat. Moist or clam-like, or grown cool, or I am hungry and left out in the rain. And what would the flesh contain but seeds or pit, or a silence that crept under it? Gills like minuscule lacerations, not bleeding, but a sinkhole I fell into. The earth gave way, a depression, collapse, chasms of not knowing, a sinking foundation. No, not quicksand, not sucked in as if eaten or ingested, but falling against abysms, or as if hollowing, or a basin plunged in, or stoned against the abyss. I flung myself tenderly as if the flesh were the only knowing, which it is. Or homeless, or out of my body, the moon gathered me, spooned me up to its sporulations of stardust or rot, and the body fruiting, a blade of grass or green corn husk. The not empty fields I passed, or falling against highways, I kept going, kept driving clear out of myself or the city. A dear collusions of time and space and instances of the ultimate fleshliness, I went into it, as if by ceasing to exist we might cease seeking to flee existence. Its neck snapped cleanly, it fell or was thrown against the force of its elated body bounding across space or away, as if we were bound to the earth or this flesh. Its chest, the pale honey lacerations like false gills of chanterelles, as if to breathe or not. Soft curve of the neck turned and cracked. You might say a voice not lost but thrown into the distance, and across what chasms of not me, or escaped through what boundaries of a carcass, leapt over what fences of he did not touch me, and I was running to the other side of flesh, to each its opposite thing, the earth, the pendulum swing of sky. I mean the sky caught my fall, or he husked me green, and I was bounding toward what oblivion of cornfields, or rose stretching to, or the misunderstanding of the force of moving bodies, inertia or momentum, my own, flinging against or pushing what edges, as if sliced tenderly, you might say I was sunk or subterranean, a shadow against, or submerged in his absence, or that I'm crossing into silence, or pale kernels of truth. It grew, an egret in the shallows near the bank, where limb shadows traced the dark lines of themselves. White porcelain body, shallows near the bank, long curving neck and wing. I looked through the trees, an eye that pierced the surface, as if grief were its legacy, or I could not articulate the lack, as if I needed it, or regretted the gloam that was spreading in the east, or the fire that night is, a burn in my skin. Where, egret, do you dissolve in the branches, into what dark or distance? As if even my grief were not graceful enough to traverse it, or in the morning my throat burns to sing a verse to ease it. Easing in, sunset, soft lines of shore, water, roots exposed, or exposing my winglessness. It grew and grew again, more restless, tethered, inward. I went walking, clear out of myself, or to what edges of it, from the center of what engulfed me, beyond where what began outside of me was. I was drifting, or the self and love is a maze, a labyrinth. I took a road because something caved in on me. There was a buzzing in my head where he was not. Fields cleared where once there were trees. The moon rose, stalks of corn like lightning struck in the heat, and bolts of cloth like a husk, a doll's dress, or what once clothed me or never was, and grew again more restless in my skin. Tethered inward as if a grain of pollen traveling downward through the silk, descending into the ear, each strand of hair leading toward a follicle as if inroads growing outward, I took a road because a better abandonment than darkness, as if to coax a grain or grow the flesh by turning silken, a strand, spooling out from nothingness, the not yet kernel, or spilling oneself beyond the shelter or prison of husk, as if weeping were once sacred or our eyes were never sheathed. It grew and grew again, turned inward on the fruit, a skull or cavity, a heady buzz, a dragonfly midair, a coalescence of wings, thoracic collisions of what once was thrombosis, one moment the next, lifting me. He lifted above, yes, above the water they spun, barrel rolled, dived, vivid or regressing or moved on to what thoughts of how we. Sky being the primary evolutionary driver of wings. He took flight from his hunger or mine, or the sky opened and he flew against it. We flew against it. Born, each of us, into the distance. To mean this traveling is how we live, to try to love these distances, or the closing in on them, or what else is there but to wipe clean the lens of our attention. A flower, to say we shook ourselves awake, or desire is our orientation. What other compass? To mean we compromised our vision, or love re-envisioned us, that nothing is promised but this hunger, and only this openness against bottomless or empty or endless. Meniscus in the pre-dawn dusk behind my eyelids. I do not wake into its brief, low arc from the cask of sleep, but gaze through the gauze of curtains, its yellow glow. I dream the warm dreams of snakes or muskrats curled into themselves on the bank, soft light resting below the earth, reaching up or uncooling. Motors shut off, cooling in the quiet, owls returning from unknown hunts, grasp of talons on the smooth pale limbs, eyes as discs of sorghum, ceramic plates or unjointedness or doubled over in our sheets, almost silken, numb or awake. Diagenesis, dissolution or fossilization of minerals as if recumbent or evaporated, epidermal, as if settling on ocean's floor, a practice or oblivion, unburied or unburying us, how we were fleshed in the night, a slow flush from thickets of us. In the morning, flutter, rouse. In the caves at Lasseau, pollen grains of grasses excavated, to mean that they bedded underneath their ochre shadows, coals of river cane torches or ashes. As if oryx we met in the dim light of the meniscus and galloped or ungulated, eyes unglued, thin cracks. We sighed ourselves into the throats of one another. Wall of the dam, above we walked suspended across, behind which water pressured, pooled, above the gorge trickled of water over wet rocks cragged far beneath us, mists crouching over the lake like the breath of animals surrounding us, or wrapped in exhalations, and I wondered if he saw me slipping or a crosscut, something to rescue myself, an oscillation or the ground. I turned. Big ridge, its creeks and tributaries, wild hibiscus, the rose mallow, elephantopus, leaves hairy, triangular cups of angular flowers, rough, a man above on the dam, backflipped, plunged, changed languages. A cedar rotting fragrant on the bluffs above the river, a tributary or my home ground, I returned. Rich musk of its xylem ceased, or interior striations of rot, as if ingrained with fallen or beginning, moistened dendritic cobwebbing grown soft. It was everything I needed. Rotting or carried by the current, that it reflected me or the distance. He sent me a photograph, butterfly emerging as if to say, I am not who I was, or we have shifted tectonic, or to sip nectar, its wing coloring of orange and teal as if dusted, patterned or marked, its lumens against the empty, the lines, antennae, thorax sheathed even in folding, or we were unloosed, broke free. We once were landmassed as if to say we drifted. a ruptured crust, not to speak of the elisions or what records expunged and how we erased them. The erasures of water and what was shored up against, our orifices as if habitats for snails, whelks, conchs, mollusks, clams, or salamanders, as if the world was lungless. Walking, a hive of bees that sounded like a highway in the heart of the wood, cavity awake with wings, a copper pot rested with honey. Bees swarmed the entrance, inside, clustered in the hive's cells, or cloistered, I was numbed. Combing the edges of the fields, indigo buntings contained in their blue shells of elastic sheen, feathers, or royalty, my graces, stumbled, stunned me, the songs as if woven to my lips, melodies as if sessiled or pierced by their stems or petiolate, as if not to